here on your Horsewise page.
Good for you.
So I'm just kind of curious because I have not used Facebook Live.
Well, it's pretty simple.
Facebook's come out with a lot of cool tools. That was one of the things I thought would be interesting to talk about is how technology right now.
I know, it's been amazing. And that's been like a great side benefit, of the pandemic in a way. I mean, I don't like to say like lots of people died but we have good technology now, but I feel like people have gotten a lot more aware of how to get in touch with each other out of necessity. Otherwise we'd all be quarantining and not really talking very much. So let's see.
You've had like the epic quarantine.
Oh my gosh.
I think you've had the quarantine like on a deeper level than anyone I know.
Me, because of
I think
because of my husband.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was it kind of prepared me, So what I'm hearing now is we're setting up for Facebook Live. And in a minute, I'm not even looking at you right now, so
I could be making faces at you?
I would totally not get that. Now it says that we are streaming on Facebook Live, so we have to act really serious as if we are grown-up people, which we're not. But
grown-ups, except for we have horses, which means we never have to grow up.
That's right. That's why we have them. So I'd like to welcome all of the Horsewise listeners and watchers, potentially, and introduce you to Emma Daily Kline, who is a fantastic horsemanship person that I discovered many years ago. Well, not many years ago, a few years ago on Facebook. And horsemanship is only one thing that she does. She's also a fantastic realtor in the Oregon area. And I think kind of a life philosopher based on some of the things that I've read on your Facebook posts and on your blog. Emma also works through Northwood Farms, which is an amazing horsemanship challenge every year, which personally has saved my butt in the winter months when I didn't know what to do with my horses. So I would kind of follow along with that. So welcome, Emma. Thank you so much for joining us on your lunch hour. I know you're super busy, and we appreciate the time.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here. I'm glad we've been talking about this for a year, at least a year.
At least a year, yeah.
I'm like, oh, look, we can do it.
Yes, exactly. Here we are. Everybody, hi, everybody. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I found you, like what drew me to some of your Facebook posts. I'm a well-known Facebook stalker of horsemanship people. It's just one of my things. Yes, it's just one of my things. I actually collect photos of really cool moments, that have been captured maybe like at some of the buck clinics or at the colt starting or things like that. And then through that, I kind of would track back to people, because where I live, there's a lot of horse people, but they may not be as into this particular type of horsemanship that is, kind of more of a philosophy rather than a technique. So I think I first came across you through some photos of the buck colt starting clinic long ago. I think because you had been to a couple of those. This is for folks who don't know, Buck Brannaman does an annual invitational colt starting at his ranch in Wyoming. And by invitational, it means that all of the people who are starting the colts are specifically approved by Buck, so that you have a certain quality of horsemanship. And it's just really fascinating. I've never been to it in person, but I always look eagerly for the photo stream. And I think it was the Nicole who took photos that year.
Yes, the Nicole.
The Nicole, who was somebody I also have been stalking for years when she was called Horse Photography or something back in the day. So
she was now at NicolePoyo.com.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah. Say that again, because I talked over it.
Yeah, Nicole Poyo, so P-O-Y-O. NicolePoyo.com.
Yeah,
I think.
Fantastic.
Or Nicole Poyo Photography. Oh, that's horrible. She's I think it's NicolePoyo.com. We'll have to look.
Well, look in the show notes. I will do show notes that will actually make it correct, and then we'll apologize for your mistake if you made a mistake.
Just type in Nicole, and Google will know who it is.
You'll find it. They'll find her. Yeah. So I noticed you because you had a helmet, and you looked. Obviously you were more. I mean, you looked punchy in your way, but you looked also more like somebody I could relate to. And I was like, who is this person? So, and from there, I kind of looked up your blog. There you are. Look at that. Are you in the very front of the photo?
Yeah, I'm in the very front of the photo. This is Nicole. Took that photo.
And was that horse's name something like Sprinkles or?
This one was Frosting. So there were three. And so the joke began because I was like, well, these guys had to give me a cupcake, because here I was like just the non-cold starter. And I think really I was one of 3 girls that first year.
Wow.
And so anyway, I was like, just please give me a cupcake. So then the whole cupcake series began.
Right.
And so the first one was the cupcake, and then that one was frosting. And then the last one was Sperry the Sprinkle.
Sperry the Sprinkle. That he was a paint. Is that right? Is that what I'm
Yep.
thinking? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I kind of vaguely remember that. So I saw those photos. Yeah, I saw those photos. And there's many people who tend to attend that clinic that I stalk, of course, already for photos. So I'm like, who's this person? So I went to your page and I saw all of you have such an interesting take on, it's just very interesting to me, the blend between classical dressage and also accessing these horses through their mind, and also very detailed study of horsemanship was what I felt you did. Very disciplined. I think I actually have this taped to my computer, like monitor, be relentlessly consistent. And I think I picked that up from something you had either posted about or commented on, and how much work it is, yet it becomes like this daily steady discipline. It's almost like the way you have presented it, very meditative day to day. So I really liked that. And then of course, just you're very articulate, a good writer. So that's everybody. That's why I just wanted to interview Emma. So here she is. And then the Northwood Farms Horsemanship Challenge, I think, was one of the kind of first large-scale attempts to put together a horsemanship community in a way that was supportive and helping each other just kind of reach goals, and a fairly unusual tone to it. Because sometimes when you have these kind of challenges, people get super competitive. Nothing wrong with competition, but it can undermine other goals. And I was really impressed with how that was run and organized, even though I know maybe you'll say I'm wrong, but I know that that's a labor of love. It's not like you get a lot of money in sponsorships or something. Like, it's this constant thing. So that's how I know you. And you've come to be one of the valued sources that I go to when I am looking to deepen some knowledge, or I want to think about maybe what are the next set of goals for me that are still very related also to fundamentals. So that's why you're here.
Well, thank you so much for having me. That means a lot to me, and I did not know that. I definitely did not know that. So it's so interesting, right, to hear the echo back.
Yes, it is. So now we're going to put you on the spot, because I've talked a lot and people get tired of me talking. So why don't you just sort of share how this all came together for you? I know that a lot of people get very engrossed in horsemanship, but it seems like in some ways you've integrated your life around it, yet while also being, as we joked at the beginning of this, a grown-up, right? You have, a whole profession, an entrepreneurial enterprise of your own. And you're also doing what is the equivalent of, of course, high quality, but also full-time work in the horsemanship field. So just tell everyone about you and why you're so amazing.
Yeah. Oh boy.
No pressure.
Well, yeah, really. Well, I do think that, so probably one of the things that is an interesting twist than what we do normally see is somebody that spends this much time with horses, and I ride a string of 5 or 6. Which is a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot to make no money from,
right?
Right. In the sense that directly, I'm not teaching lessons, I'm not riding for the public. And that's something that evolved, over time. Of course, I started riding when I was 12, just, in 4-H and came up through the ranks. And so have been a very serious horsemanship student, basically all along. But what has the twists and turns that came was at every time, at every juncture that it possibly could turn pro, I just had little whispers from my mentors saying, if you can keep it art, just keep it art.
Oh,
well,
cool.
So what that meant was, don't keep the commerce detached from it if you can, right? Mm-hmm. And so, we've sold some horses, a few here and there. And of course, the Northwood Farms thing is a commercial venture.
Sure.
But the focus is not to make money.
Right.
And so then there had to be an income stream separate from that.
Right.
And so actually becoming a realtor and then owning my own real estate business for even more freedom was all by design. It's all because I wanted to have as much freedom and dollars per hour as possible.
Okay.
So lucky for me, you know, my real estate business is by referral only, and basically community based as well. And the great part about that is that so many horse people are involved in it. So it's amazing. But essentially doing 2 full-time jobs is probably the hardest thing in my life.
Right. Right.
Just frankly.
Yeah. How do you prioritize? Is it that because I know with horses, it's very difficult to go, I'm only going to work with horses 2 hours today. Like something always changes. And I'm sure with real estate, it's not like I'm doing the real estate work from 3 to 5 p.m. because it's this ongoing. So how do you manage that? I think it's probably more of a mindset thing than a calendar thing or a time management thing. Is it more mindset for you or?
Well, it's both.
Mm-hmm.
It's both. I tend to think of things by the week. Have you read The Power of the Week?
I have. That's a great book.
Yeah. And the 12-week year.
Mm-hmm.
Those are some of my favorites, you know. And so just thinking of the horses in blocks, like, you know, how many rides, if I want to make progress with these horses, how many rides,
mm-hmm.
you know, per week is kind of the minimum. And then, you know, I just block that out. Obviously, my real estate clients have to come first. And
Right.
so a lot of times that means getting up early. And I think the thing that I had to sacrifice, right, maybe like 5 years ago when things really started to get busy for me and my business started to be pretty significant. I was traveling a lot too.
Oh,
I was driving over here this morning and I was thinking to myself, I kind of miss the smell of jet fuel. What does that mean? It's kind of a weird thing.
We all miss that now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that getting the, you know, being in charge of people's assets is crucial, and that has to be first. So what had to get sacrificed on a personal level with the horses was I wasn't able to schedule ride times with my friends anymore.
I see.
It was like, so what ended up happening is I'm the one who's like, hey, I'm going to be at the campus tomorrow at 3. Does anyone want to come? You know, because I can't plan it too far ahead because I have to just sneak my rides in whenever. Right. So, and like Davina and Zorro are at the campus, right? And I'll be texting Beth like, can I come over in like 15 minutes? Can you bring my horses in for me? So it gets a little helter-skelter, but that's okay. That's totally okay because for me, it just had to be for the freedom of thought. I guess this is what, and I'm so curious how other people do it because I know other people do it and charge and are teaching. I mean, and some of my closest friends are doing it and I'm just so amazed and my hat's off to them. But just for me personally, the way that I've had to set it up to be able to think completely freely so that it's not having to go through the front of my mind, so that it can go through the back of my mind because I'm not having to produce something. Hopefully I am producing things, you know, but it's not on cue.
It's not on a commercial schedule. You don't have a client going, I need this horse ready. I need him in the 2 rein now. And it's just that's just not how it works, right? Yeah, that's really interesting. And so for some of my listeners who may not be as familiar with when I talk about the class, the blend of classical dressage, and I call it kind of Vaquero, the Dorrance school. So horsemanship philosophy is what I always say rather than it's a series of techniques. But can you talk a little bit about how that all sort of developed for you? Because my understanding, and I don't know your history completely, in spite of being a stalker, I don't know all of it, was that you were a dressage rider, is that correct? And then you eventually got more and more interested in this approach to horsemanship that involved maybe more of the bridle horse series and how those worlds kind of came together. And because I don't know if I would have I don't think I would have known you or heard of you so much if you hadn't been at the cold starting, with the Buck Brannaman group. So if you could just talk about that a little bit more, in case I, first of all, A, garbled it, and B, just because I think it's interesting, and it's my podcast, so I get to have people talk about what I think is interesting. So it's my power trip. So.
Oh yes, and you deserve it for sure. So I grew up on borrowed horses. So I started with a little cart pony at 12 years old, and somebody just gave me a bridle and said, well, hey, if you can ride her, you can ride her. And so I walked my little butt like a mile down the road for about a year and started that little pony myself. And I sure do wish I was that bouncy. He bucked me off for quite a bit, but I kind of got that going on. And basically then I cleaned stalls for riding lessons, and I leased horses. And then as a young adult, I met Hans von Blixen through the gal that I was taking dressage lessons from. As locally, she was riding with Hans von Blixen. So for those of you guys that don't know who that is, he was an Olympian, a Swedish Olympian. And I met him when he was, oh my gosh, I think he was 85.
Wow.
And he was so amazing. And everything that Buck has taught me is 100% congruent with what Hans would teach, down to the hindquarter yield, the forequarter yield, the way that he rode with his legs, the way that he would be like, be patient. You're teaching him something. And he'd be like, it's got to come from his mind. So as a young rider, in my first, the first money that I was spending after my local riding lessons, but my education that I was putting money into was Hans. And so whenever he would come twice a year and travel the US. And that's who I would ride with. And in 2003, Kip and I had bought our property, Northwood Farms HQ. We are a little in Sheridan here, and he died.
Oh yeah.
He died at 90. And that year I met Pat and Linda Pirelli. So this is something that I don't know if you know this part.
I don't.
So I spent 10 years studying with Pat and Linda.
Wow.
Yeah. So graduated Pirelli level 3, of course, graduated with my level 4 Liberty, level 4 Finesse. And I have so many amazing friends that are Pirelli instructors to this day. And so very seriously, rode in Linda's of contact and spent weeks and weeks at their centers. It was so fun. It was the most fun ever. But when I would come to the edge of that, well, do you want to be an instructor? And it was just like, no, because this was a means. No, the answer was always no, that isn't exactly it. But because my thing was, once Hans died, I didn't have anyone that I knew of. I'm sure there were people, but I didn't know where to go next that was psychologically based, that was going to come from, with all the spirit and the relationship first. That's the most important. That's what I care about. Otherwise, I just do something else,
Right.
And I would have had a software company or something.
Something easy. Yeah, something easy, right? Silicon Valley.
Or more lucrative,
Right, exactly. Right.
So I always wanted it to be a partnership. That's what Hans taught me. That's what I loved ever since, I was a kid. And so Pirelli really fed that. And it's all about the fun and horsemanship and relationship first and all of those things. But it wasn't that I didn't want to be a dressage rider, because the gymnastics and the physicality of that was always where I was going, And so funnily enough, I was flying home from Linda Pirelli's ranch in Pagosa Springs in 2011. Would it have been? July 2011. And got a text from a buddy. Hey, we're all going to go see Buck the movie when you get home. Okay, great. So we went, and it was so great. We had a bunch of local people from the Polk County area here, and we went to the local theater and we watched Buck the movie, and what a great story, and just so neat. And then we got to the end, and Rebel, you know,
Right.
and I was like,
hello.
well, I like that.
That's what I'm looking for. Yeah, you got both, right?
Exactly. So then I was like, well, so then the next week, so I got out of the theater. I'm like, Kip, we got to figure out this, you know, what's next. And so Buck just happened to have had a bunch of cancellations due to, I think, equine virus or something that was going around. And so he happened to be in Portland. And answering questions, doing a Q&A and the next weekend. So we went up there, and because I was like, well, I want to hear this guy talk in real life, because actually he had been mentioned to me, of course, by, in fact, Linda is one of the ones who had been like, you know, you would really like riding with Buck. And I just never made it up to the Spanaway Washington Clinic to see him. And so we stopped by the theater in Portland when he was there, and I listened to him answer questions, and right away I was like, yeah, this sounds great. And then at the end of the movie, I had run out to use the restroom, and there he was. I ran into him, and I was like, oh, Buck, you know, hi, nice to meet you. We have mutual friends. And so and funnily enough too, that was right down the street from where I first moved to Portland.
Oh, wow.
That was kind of
so you're like, there's nothing's lining up here at all.
Right, nothing. And then that fall, we decided that we were going to go to Spanaway to check him out. And so Kip and I went, and we paid one day at a time, in case in real life he was not that good with his horses. I love telling that story.
So and after the second day, you're like, I think he's okay. Like, this guy's probably all right. Yeah.
Right. It was first.
He's pretty good. Yeah.
It was the first day when we were sitting at the top, and actually it was 3 days in, and I had just been like, okay, well, this is what I'm talking about. Right. You know, so going all the way back to your question, like, this is the dream, right? Mental, emotional, spiritual, physical connection between horse and human, right? And I'd been watching, and Buck knew I'd been watching, right? And so the very first question I ever asked him, I just said, Buck, I've been watching for 3 days, and I can't tell the difference between the engaging steps and the disengaging steps.
He's like, I like you.
And he goes, well, there are no disengaging steps. And I was like, sold.
Okay, you're it.
So then basically the short version of the rest of that story is I rode with him, or I didn't ride with him, but I spent about 12 weeks out of the year with him for 6 years in a row.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's pretty serious. Like, I had found my next teacher, and of course we become great friends, and he's been so generous with me, as he is with everybody. Yeah, I've gotten to make some bridle horses, and now, just over the last couple of years, gotten some warm bloods, you know, and a beautiful PRE, and we can talk much more about how it overlays on all the horses, you know, and how that teaches you stuff. But the brilliant part about buck steel, and what suits me to my core, is the whole curriculum. And it's such a funny thing, isn't it? Because people are struggling. So especially when you do have to commercialize it to some degree. I mean, I struggle with it just wanting to talk about it in a vlog. Right. You know, how do you, it's this person's horsemanship, or it's like, because you want to like give credit where credit's due. But on the other hand, you don't want to like be saying you're teaching someone's method when I feel like I can't even say, okay, so here's how I think about, you know, using the circling game. Everyone wants to know how to use, because I don't even want to take, from my friends that are Pirelli instructors or from Patentland, I'm scared to even say the circling game.
Right. Right. No, I do.
Hesitant is. And so lucky for me, with studying with Buck, and my whole vlog series that we got to do from that was just like, look, this is just what I'm doing with my horses, and this is my teacher. So that's the whole gist of it. And then, the next few layers will be, I have a couple of great dressage coaches in the wings, and bring that all back to the center. Buck says that he will help me too. The answers are at the beginning, right? The answers really are at the beginning. And the colt starting, like being able to do that colt start at Bucks for those 3 years was so amazing. The only reason I stopped going is just because it's really hard to leave for 10 days in the middle of mega real estate season. Yeah. It's really, really rough. Plus we have other Buck clinics around here too.
Right.
So it's just unfortunately, I wish there was something going on in winter. That would be cool. But so the whole curriculum, from swinging the loop and throwing it, like watching Gary, right?
And by the way, just before you get going, we're talking about Gary Bailey of Bailey Horsemanship in Oklahoma, who is an incredible horseman. And those of you who've been listening for a while, I do 2 things. I run LOPE, a racehorse adoption charity. We work with war horses, who are horses who will never be bridle horses, but they're fascinating horses. And then I do Horsewise, the podcast and coaching. Gary went with us to Puerto Rico to do a clinic for the race training community, the jockeys, to kind of help them see ways to enhance performance using a method that maybe wasn't quite so, confrontational. So, and I actually heard of Gary through you, because you went and rode with him some colts and everything, I think. And I'm like, who's this guy? So I went and looked him up. And then when we were looking for a clinician, we'd gotten in a horse that was very troubled from Puerto Rico, and got us interested in learning more about how to maybe help over there. And so I talked to Mr. NG, who referred me to Gary, and I'm like, I know who Gary is. And so it was just like this whole thing. So go back to what you were saying about Gary.
Well, so for those of you guys that know the Buck Brannaman crowd, there's definitely an element of giving your horse a job and roping and cattle and all of this. And I think some people thought that when I came into the Buck Brannaman crowd that I was going to get all ropey, or at least try to, at least change my outfit. But they all started to get the clue when I didn't change my Pirelli saddle for 3 years. So I was never going to be into the roping or the cows. Although pushing cows around is really fun, but it's a little bit like guns, Yes, we should probably all know how to use guns, but you got to practice. You have to practice. So if you're gonna, roping and doing a proper job with your horse is awesome, but there's got to be a little bit of reality in terms of what your lifestyle is like. And my lifestyle just does not include having actual cattle around me. Mm-hmm. That's just not part of my. But I got to at a certain point, I said, "Hey, Buck, what do you think?" I met this guy I met Gary at a Buck clinic because his daughter Cassidy was riding. And I'm like, what do you think? Should I go down? He's like, yeah, go down and check it out. So Gary and I have become great friends. And lucky for me, I've gotten to spend several days down there about 5 or 6 times a year. Awesome. And man, I'll tell you what, that guy is a gem. Watching him start colts, because it's really different at a Buck Brannaman clinic setting, or any kind of colt starting setting. Joel does clinics too, where you have multiple colts getting started. At one time, there's a whole special dynamic that comes with that, but also it's not the same as when it's just one guy and one horse, right? And man, I could talk about for another hour and a bit about Gary and his whole history. I really think you should have him on the podcast.
If I can coax him on, I will. He's busy guy, but I'd love to have him on. He's Great.
He just has a great story. I mean, he's like 5th generation cowboy, and
Yeah.
but and the thing is, the beginning, I guess this is what I'm saying, is the very beginning, from bringing a wild baby into the round pen, and for a real horseman to be horseback and to swing a loop over that baby's neck and to start from there, and then to go all the way through a finished snaffle bit horse, and then what are you going to go from there? You know, it's very congruent. It is, I guess that's my point about the curriculum. You know, there's an art in all of that, but it's kind of like part of our American, what's the word? Heritage. That's not what I'm. It's just something cool. It's a gem that we have. This horsemanship curriculum that goes from that moment of swinging the first loop. And although that's not something I'm going to do, I know what that looks like. I've spent a ton of time around, and I know what it's like to go catch those babies when they are halter broke but not gentle.
Right. Interesting.
What's the difference? Because I didn't, maybe 5-6 years ago, I didn't even know that you could have a baby that was halter broke but not gentle. And you could have a horse that would be gentle but not halter broke. Right. And what do those things feel like? Right.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then you were saying too at the start of this discussion on curriculum that you're now getting into maybe another level of goals or another series of goals. You have some dressage coaches lined up, you've got bucks on board, and how it relates back to all of it is in the beginning. And so there's that kind of classic saying that you have to start one to know how to finish one, you have to finish one to know how to start one. And since you're clearly very much in that sort of circle of the foundation to the end result, since you've finished bridle horses and you've also done a lot of the colt starting, and you've been working with people who understand that at a very deep level above and beyond the superficial, how has that affected your goals now? Like what are your goals, the ones you're comfortable talking about?
Well, so my goals are probably the same. I mean, I don't think it's different, other than, I mean, it's just taken me this long to be able to kind of start jumping. It's taken me since Hans died in 2003, so 17 years, to really get to a place where I'm riding 3 horses in a dressage saddle now. For years, I didn't even have a dressage saddle. So, probably my personal curriculum is going to end up something like, or I don't know if curriculum is the right way to say it, but I think you can't go wrong making a snaffle bit horse, right? A snaffle bit horse for sure. And then, of course, what could be wrong with having a level 3 Pirelli horse in that same horse, right? That'll run to you at the gate, and you can ride bareback and bridleless, and to me, that's all super fun. Why would you not have those things? Why would you not have a horse that can jump the barrels? Why would you not have a horse that can, load at liberty? Of course, if you have time, of course you would do all those things, right? And then probably, I would like to see what I can do in terms of maybe, really starting to progress through the medals, maybe. So we'll see. A lot of stuff happened when I got Zorro last year, and Davina a few years before that. It was a big deal, because getting the horses that would really show me the ropes.
Right. And that were capable of going to different levels. I know that you spent a lot of time working with horses, I think, that weren't perfect, and you got so much out of that, right? You've worked with some rescue horses.
Priceless.
Vivian's one of the horses I think I followed for a while, and there's so much to learn from this, so profound, right? But it's also really cool to take that and then apply it to a horse that has a different level of capability, or aptitude might be a better word for it. Physical aptitude is a real thing with certain kinds of athleticism. And So that must be kind of interesting for you.
It is. It's really interesting, especially Zorro being so educated already. He came from a little bit of a different school of what I'll end up at, because he came through sort of the very French style. And that's probably not my focus, although it's kind of funny because in a way you would think that Buck's school is more French, which it kind of is. But I think when it comes down to the ultimate, the style, the way that I want things to look, probably the Charlotte Dujardin's horses. I would say that when I watch her ride, I'm like, yep, that looks good to me. That looks good to me. She and Carl, yeah.
And what's the difference to you between that and maybe what would be considered? I know these are kind of terms, right? But is it?
Yeah, I don't have any criticisms. I don't.
No, totally. One thing I just like to say is, I've never developed a full bridle horse. Probably never will. But people who develop bridle horses, well, maybe so. People who develop bridle horses, the horses tend to reflect the person a little bit. There's like these. I mean, that's why I think it's so artistic about it. And so you can have a preference for a certain look that doesn't criticize the others. So I'm just curious about what that is for you.
So there's a throughness. There's a throughness that like I really crave when I'm riding. And so I'm quite unwilling to like raise the head and give up right underneath, which I've done all of that. I've experimented with all of that, right? But I don't like that. I had to kind of ride Zorro in secret. The gal that I bought him from is one of my very best friends, so she knows all about what's going on, But I'm like, I don't want to go with his head down, I'm having a heart attack about it. But I'm like, you have to get through to the lower back. You have to get through to, like, it's kind of like, when you maybe drop your head all the way down to the floor and put your palms on the floor. You got to like let everything relax, and then you can put the vertebra back, one stack at a time. And
well, it's kind of like yoga. You do the forward fold and then you rise slowly to mountain. And so that's when you realize where you're, okay, so there's that kink there. Or if you rush it, you'll still get to the vertical position, but you'll miss something that's very significant along the way. And I work a lot with rehab horses. So my deal is I work with these horses. They're called war horses off the track. They run till 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, even 13 years old. So they're green and they're full of braces that are specific to their sport. They're also really cool, smart, interesting horses personality-wise because they ran that long voluntarily. You can't make a horse run that long. They break down so it's a very interesting blend. And so one of the things that I've noticed is as I've tried to study more and get more consistent with certain things, is that a lot of times when they first learn to maybe just swing a little bit from behind, and I'm talking about infinitesimal, like this is just like the smallest thing, even if it might be a little faster than would be perfect in the perfect world, I am inclined to let them stretch down because they've never felt even for those few minutes. And if I feel like if I do this, I'm much more likely to get an eruption, even though someone else will be like, oh my God, you don't have any. But it's not like I'm throwing the reins away. I'm not sophisticated enough to even do that. I'm just like, I can feel it's really important to not interfere with that little bit of swing, which for them is like life-changing. And so I get what you mean, even though I'm doing this on a very rudimentary level here and there.
Well, but it is tiny though. And I would say that just because it's on a small level doesn't mean that it's less significant. It might be more significant because of course on the smaller the level, the more it's coming from the horse's mind.
Yes, that's a really good point. And then the horses we work with, their minds are fascinating things, extra fascinating. I
have always wanted to do a war horse for sure. It's on my list.
I've got one for you. We will talk later. But the thing that's really interesting about them is that they are so locked up in some ways, but like seriously, like their jaw, they have no idea that that jaw can move. They're like, it doesn't. I move my whole neck. And so when they finally get to this, just for a second, they will release for like minutes. And it's this huge thing emotionally because no one's ever waited for that very, very, very tiny thing. And it's not like they immediately become bridle horse ready, but it changes them. And it's very profound to be part of that. So when we have teen interns and stuff working with the horses, we're basically teaching them to focus on that. What's that expression, and how did that horse change when you led him away after that session? And so I get what you're talking about with that. It's very, the small things are really the most profound, aren't they, sometimes?
Yeah. Oh yeah, because you can just get a fancy enough horse in whatever discipline. It doesn't matter. Buy metallic cat or, buy a super fancy dressage horse or whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter. Buy the most expensive thing and then you could just get a result. But that's not the fun part.
No.
That's not the fun part. The fun part is the partnership. And so going back to the horses that were, that still live with me, by the way. Some of you guys remember Jax, a scrubbed out Western pleasure horse, made a bridle horse, gorgeous. Like he taught me. I have a new horse named Maggie. I'll have to tell you about her. But
I saw the video with her weird gait anomaly. That was really interesting. It's like it's not quite rein lameness, but some things like, it does seem like it's mental. I could kind of see what you were saying. Pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and it's gone. So I'm so glad I got it on video because it was just a learned behavior. But Jax taught me what a horse can do in spite of their body, in spite of what their body is telling them that they can do. And so I guess that's the good stuff just for me, what floats my boat and certainly I think what Buck has given me that I've always wanted is there was no end to the well with Buck. When I would always, I'd come to him from having some crazy, 6 weeks of practicing with my horses, and I'd have thoughts and ideas, and there was no wall ever. He just the next layer, and the goal was always to have it come from the horse's mind. So the problem with that is that it becomes really challenging. Who can you talk to about that?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. That's why I started the podcast. Seriously.
Yeah. We have to go to extreme measures.
Do whatever it takes, because it can sound flaky to talk about it a little bit. Like if you, just in the sense that there's a lot of precision and discipline involved, whether you're doing it again on a very basic level like I am, or if you're doing it at the level where, bridle horses and, beautiful working horses in the tradition. But it can sound like there's no precision involved, but there is a lot of precision even in following your intuition, even in really paying attention to what the horse is trying to offer. I feel like that does take as much discipline and precision as the athletic training you might put yourself through or your horse through to be conditioned. But we're not used to talking about it that way. It feels a little like,
Well, you have to go to the artist to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think you have to that's to me where I found the companionship. I mean, of course, we have horse people that we can talk to about these sorts of things. But for me, where I really found it was in other artists, in other disciplines.
That makes sense.
Because
yeah.
You got to go to the intuitive part of letting a skill develop far, far away from your logical mind.
Right.
And it kind of hashes on I'll just speak from my experience. Like I would go through these periods of being able to write really prolifically about something, and then I'd have nothing to say. because it all would be going in stuff would be happening in the back, or I'd tell Buck, like I would watch him ride or something would happen and could feel like all these neurons firing and all this stuff. And I knew I'd learned something, but I had no idea what it was. No idea.
That's really interesting.
And so then what do you say? You don't have anything to say. Talk about like sounding airy fairy. But then you go to another artist or even another athlete, like a distance runner or something like this, and they're, oh yeah, sure, oh yeah. You know?
I get that. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. And it's also, well, for me, I had this experience 14 years ago. I was at a little horse event and was working with a horse, and I shouldn't have been working with the horse. I shouldn't have been at the event. And something really profound happened. And as I walked out of the arena, I talk about it in a book I wrote. It was like it was the end of an arc. Like I could just feel this end of an arc in my learning. And I knew that I would write a book about it, which I did, which was not on my to-do list for that year. But if it hadn't been for that moment, I wouldn't have understood this context. And then that book was about kind of horsemanship and what the horses had taught me, but it was, successful book. But it came from that. Then I didn't write anything for like 4 years that was significant, but it was something that really, it's like for me, I end up percolating a lot in the background, and then all of a sudden I'll like vomit out like, 10,000 words on something, or I'll start a podcast or whatever it is. But to me, it's all part of the work itself. It isn't like this indulgent, I'm just sharing what I feel like. It's like, well, I want to, well, first of all, I'd like to contribute what I can, a forum, but I also am very interested and want to learn more in a way that is responsible, meaning that I'm taking responsibility for my education. I'm not just saying, oh, I want to learn everything, but I don't want to actually practice it or take responsibility for improving, and also not kind of cop out by saying, oh, I suck. Like, like there's all these sort of layers to it. That's true for art. And I think horsemanship is an art. So anyway, that's just my little rant on it. Same kind of thing. I was going to ask you about your writing, because your writing to me does seem very related to your riding. And I find that most people who write well about horsemanship are usually very skilled and very much committed to the art of horsemanship. Somehow those two things really go together, I think.
Yeah. And it's just interesting how everybody, well, the folks that I follow or the people that have managed to produce, and certainly to produce over time, and certainly to survive the wash of medium that we have, right?
Right.
And what gets written out is just a fascinating deal. And I love being able to be a part of it, for sure.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I mean, there's times when I'll go back and read something and be like, I completely forgot about that.
Yeah.
So what if you don't write it down? Then does it disappear?
It just disappears. It's gone. Well, we've been talking for almost an hour. I don't know if you're aware of that. This is a Horsewise podcast meme where we're like, it's been 10 minutes, right? And it's been almost an hour. Yeah. And I do know that you have a real life to get back to. But as we're kind of ending this up, is there anything in particular you would like to just sort of share or talk about, an ending comment? I know I have a hunch we're going to be talking again, because I feel like obviously we have a lot that we could continue to develop. Even if it's just about each of your horses, like a Zorro podcast episode would be wonderful. And but yeah, for this one, what kind of comes to mind here as we get to the end?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. Nothing in specific. I think I'm really excited about Maggie. So the warm bloods that I'm writing are Willow and Davina and Zorro, and this new Oldenburg Maggie, who came into my life. And what I think will be exciting, if I can pull it off, is I'm just going to try to do some pretty raw stuff about her, and I'll put it on my Instagram channel, and so you guys can kind of see. Like, it's not going to be fancy or produced, but I think it will be worth capturing, because it's just an interesting deal, that little learned behavior. And I think, like I said, she was on Equiox every day, and she was on injections and all sorts of things. But I really think that it maybe was just a little bit of an underestimation of what a horse can learn in their mind.
Well, and before you finish that thought, for the people who, and I'll post a link to the video into your Instagram feed, but explain what you mean by that learned behavior specifically, because people don't know what you mean who are listening in Bulgaria right now.
Right. Okay. Hi to Bulgaria. What's the weather in Bulgaria, I wonder?
I don't know. But I do have listeners in Bulgaria. That's actually a real thing. I do have listeners in Bulgaria.
I believe you. I believe you.
I don't know why. I don't know anybody in Bulgaria, but there you go.
Shout out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, I came across this beautiful horse that kind of had an intermittent offness. Mm-hmm. It's amazing how many comments and private messages and stuff that I got after that, because it's so hard for people to wrap their brain around that it could be a learned behavior. It looked like just a super short step on her right hind leg, mm-hmm. like really, really short. And I just had a gut instinct that it possibly could just have been a learned behavior.
And learned how, did you think?
Oh, I don't know. Accidentally rewarded.
Accidentally rewarded.
Accidentally rewarded. That's what I think. But I could totally be wrong. I really could totally be wrong. It's October something, 19th. It's my wedding anniversary. It's October 19th.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. And so I think I've had her for about 5 weeks, and she's off of everything, and she's sound.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, and she had been x-rayed and ultrasounded and all of those things. And the gal that had her just was so awesome and so nice, but she was like, I can't figure this out. It's time for me to move on, and I was like, I got to give it, a shot. So I'm like, let's just get this on video really quick. Cause I've done that. I've created rein lame horses. Although this was on the ground, like,
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we'll see. Yeah. But I do have another little video I'll be putting up, just some canter. She's really used to being ridden with a stick. Like, she was ridden with the whip a lot, and really happy. And so I ditched the stick, because I don't want to always have to ride with one. Nothing wrong with it if you do, but no, I just want to be.
I'm uncoordinated. If I have to have an extra thing in my hand, I'm not responsible for my leg. Right. It's my failing, right?
But so then I had to kick her in the belly. Of course, right. We're going through this process of like, yeah, but you got to go, and if you don't go, I'm going to kick you in the belly with my spur. And she's like, oh, I hate that. I know, but we're gonna get over it. So there's some relearning a seat connection there, but I think it'll be fun. It'll be the first time that I've really shared just raw footage with people for a long time. Cool.
Yeah, I'm really interested in following it personally, and for sure, that's great that you're doing that.
So I hope you guys, tune in and just trust that. I think this is right, but we'll see. I could be wrong.
Yeah. Well, tell everybody what your Insta handle is. And
so I hid it a while ago. It's if you type in Emma Daily Kline, my horsemanship channel is Evolution of a Girl.
Very good.
So you should be able to find it there. And of course, you can always go to Northwood Farms Facebook page.
Yes.
And the breadcrumbs are there as well.
And I will post a link in the show episodes for my listeners so that they can find find all those different links, and also your vlogs, which are really fun. They're on of course, the Northwood Facebook page and on the website, and they're on YouTube and all those cool things. And I'll post to those as well, because those are awesome and really fun. And
I have one coming up with Flora.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So Sunday, it's set to go out on Sunday.
Awesome.
She did. Yeah, when she was doing the Buck Brandon Cold Start.
Oh, that's really neat. Well, Emma, thank you so much for being on the podcast. We really enjoyed having you. And again, I predict we'll have you on again, maybe for a shorter one on a specific course or topic. But it's just been great talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn.
Thanks. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.